For decades, the marathon runner has stood as the symbol of human cardiovascular health. Pushing the body to these physical limits was widely assumed to build a heart protected from the chronic diseases of a sedentary life. That assumption held until the advent of high-resolution medical imaging allowed cardiologists to look directly inside these athletic hearts. When researchers began scanning lifelong masters athletes, the data revealed a contradiction. These individuals, despite their peak physical condition, often carried a higher burden of coronary plaque than active, non-athletic control groups. Coronary plaque is the physical accumulation of calcified and non-calcified fatty deposits that build up and narrow the inside of the artery walls. These deposits contradict established biological expectations. For years, we assumed that high-volume aerobic exercise functioned as a vascular sweep, clearing the arteries rather than contributing to their obstruction. This leads to an investigative challenge. Why does this plaque form in the very people who should be most protected? To understand what this buildup means for an athlete's health, we have to look past the top-line fitness numbers. Peak physical output does not automatically grant the vascular system immunity. To find the answer, we have to look closer and examine the microscopic biomechanics of the athletic heart under stress. At rest, blood flows through the epicardial arteries in a smooth, straight pattern. This laminar flow is protective, maintaining the health of the vessel walls. During intense athletic exertion, the environment shifts. The heart rate jumps above 180 beats per minute, and cardiac output multiplies by 6. This chart illustrates the internal pressure surge. While resting blood pressure stays low, peak athletic effort generates extreme pulsatile pressure, routinely hitting 200 to 220 millimeters of mercury inside the arteries. This intense pressure creates relentless circumferential wall deformation. The artery wall is physically stretched and relaxed thousands of additional times per day, accumulating into millions of high-pressure cycles over a multi-decade athletic career. This massive volume of pressurized blood does not travel in a perfectly straight line. It is forced to navigate sharp bends and bifurcations where the coronary arteries branch off. At these geometric intersections, the protective smooth flow breaks down. The sheer velocity of the blood changing direction creates disturbed flow, chaotic, multidirectional turbulence localized exclusively at these severe bends. Exercise bathes the vast majority of the cardiovascular tree in protective conditions, yet it simultaneously generates isolated hotspots of extreme physical turbulence, setting the stage for localized structural failure. The inside of a healthy artery is lined with the endothelial glycocalyx, a delicate, negatively charged gel layer of microscopic structures, acting as the primary barrier against circulating particles. The chaotic, disturbed flow at those arterial bends acts like a localized sandblaster. Combined with extreme pressure, it physically strips away and degrades this protective gel layer. This leaves the exposed vessel wall vulnerable to apolipoprotein B, or ApoB. These are the specific microscopic particles responsible for carrying atherogenic cholesterol through the bloodstream. With the primary barrier compromised, a process called transcytosis takes over. ApoB particles physically slip right through the endothelial cell layer into the artery wall. Once inside, the particles encounter a secondary mechanism driven by that relentless mechanical stretching. The physical strain of exercise triggers the artery's smooth muscle cells to overproduce highly charged structural matrix molecules. These negatively charged molecules act like a permanent net. As soon as the positively charged ApoB particles cross the cellular barrier, they bind to these anchors and become trapped within the wall. This mechanically driven retention is the biological origin of the athlete's plaque. Decades of high-volume pressure and chaotic flow physically force cholesterol particles into the arterial wall faster than the body's metabolism can clear them out. This leaves us with a question. If lifelong endurance athletes harbor so much structurally trapped plaque, why do they consistently outlive the general population? The answer lies in a vascular adaptation called positive remodeling. As the heart pumps massive amounts of blood over decades, the epicardial arteries physically adapt to chronic high flow by expanding their outer diameter. This diagram demonstrates how the outward expansion acts as a physical buffer. The vessel wall enlarges specifically to accommodate the thick plaque buildup, which prevents the deposits from narrowing the central channel and restricting blood flow. This expanded caliber, backed by supreme metabolic efficiency and low systemic inflammation, successfully hides the clinical symptoms of coronary disease, sometimes for decades. But this physiological buffer is finite. A wider artery masks the volume of plaque. It does not grant absolute immunity from an eventual rupture or a sudden cardiac event. The true risk to the heart is dictated by cumulative particle exposure. This is the total lifelong burden of ApoB particles the vascular wall has been forced to process and retain. Looking at this trend chart, we can see how an inherited genetic predisposition to high ApoB particles easily overwhelms the athlete's mechanical buffer, independent of how many miles they log. The most effective clinical strategy is to strictly lower the concentration of circulating ApoB in the bloodstream, actively starving these localized arterial traps of their raw material. Modern sports cardiology utilizes pragmatic, stepwise pharmacological therapies to achieve this. Low-dose combinations and targeted non-statin medications are deployed specifically to drive down ApoB without affecting an athlete's physical performance or muscle recovery. Extraordinary physical fitness masks human vulnerability to cholesterol, but it does not cure it. True longevity requires protecting the biological machine from the unintended consequences of its own extreme output.